The phone rang just as the pastor asked everyone to bow their heads. My husband, Robert Murray, had been dead for 4 days.
Is that a phone? Whose phone is that?
I was standing beside his casket, my black
It's coming
gloves
from the
trembling in my
casket.
lap, when a soft melody suddenly echoed through the church. At first, I thought it belonged to someone sitting behind me. Then I realized the sound was coming from
where
inside
is it
Robert's
hidden?
suit jacket. My husband had a phone I had never seen before. Before my son could reach for it, I answered. A woman's voice whispered through the speaker. "Robert, did you tell Adriana where you hid it?" At that moment, surrounded by flowers, prayers, and the people who loved my husband, I realized I might not have known the man I had been married to for 38 years. If you've ever discovered a secret after losing someone you loved, I'd truly like to hear your story. Please like this video if these stories speak to you. Subscribe if you'd like to walk through this journey with me, and leave a comment telling me how you feel. I always love seeing where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. For 38 years, I believed I knew everything about my husband. That may sound foolish now, especially after what happened at his funeral. But when you spend nearly 4 decades beside one person, you stop questioning certain things. You learn the rhythm of their footsteps, the sound of their breathing at night, the way they hold a coffee cup, and the exact expression they make when they're worried, but trying to hide it. Robert Murray was 70 years old when he died. He had spent most of his life working as an accountant at a regional bank in central Ohio. He wasn't a wealthy man. He wasn't especially charming. He didn't tell grand stories or make dramatic gestures, but he was steady, and for most of my life, steady had felt like the safest kind of love. I met Robert when I was 28 years old. I had just divorced my first husband after a short and painful marriage, and I was raising my little daughter Emily alone. Robert was quiet and patient. He brought groceries when my car broke down. He fixed the leaking sink in my apartment. He sat beside Emily while she colored at the kitchen table. He never rushed me. He simply stayed. 2 years later, we married in a small church outside Columbus. We didn't have much money, but we had hope. Robert adopted Emily when she was 7, and when our son Michael was born 3 years later, our little family finally felt complete. There were difficult years. Robert worked long hours. I stayed home with the children and later helped at a neighborhood bakery. Sometimes we worried about bills. Sometimes we argued about money or parenting, or the usual disappointments that follow people through long marriages. But Robert never gave me a reason to doubt him. At least that's what I believed. After retirement, our lives became quieter. We moved into a smaller house on the edge of our town. Robert spent his mornings drinking coffee on the porch and reading the newspaper. I baked bread, tended my flowers, and visited Emily's family whenever I could. Michael had become a businessman. At least that was what he told everyone. He wore expensive suits, drove a new truck every few years, and talked constantly about investments and opportunities. Robert seemed proud of him, although I sometimes noticed concern in his eyes whenever Michael discussed money. Emily was different. She taught English at the local high school. She married Daniel Carter, a kind man who repaired heating systems for a living. Their lives were simple, and perhaps because of that they seemed happier. Robert and Emily had always shared a special bond. She inherited his quiet nature. Michael inherited his ambition. Looking back now, I realized that Robert had begun changing nearly a year before he died. At first, the changes were small. He started taking drives alone. When I asked where he had been, he would simply say, "Just clearing my head." He began locking the desk drawer in his study. That surprised me because Robert had never locked anything in our house. For nearly 40 years, every drawer, every cabinet, every account had belonged to both of us. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found him staring at his phone. The moment he saw me, he turned the screen over. I remember laughing. "Are you having a secret affair at 70? I joked. He smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. "If I were, she'd probably want someone younger." I laughed. He didn't. There were phone calls, too. Sometimes they came late at night. Robert would step onto the back porch, speaking quietly enough that I couldn't hear his words. When he returned, he looked tired. I asked him once if something was wrong. He kissed my forehead. "No, Adriana. I'm just taking care of something." I trusted him. Perhaps that's why the truth hurts older women differently than younger women. When you've spent decades building trust, you don't imagine that the foundation can suddenly crack. The last Christmas before Robert died was unusually quiet. Michael seemed distracted. He checked his phone constantly and disappeared outside several times during dinner. Robert watched him from across the table. At one point, I caught them arguing in the garage. Their voices were low. When I entered, they immediately stopped. Michael forced a smile. "Just talking business." Robert looked exhausted. That night, while washing dishes, I asked him if everything was all right. He stood beside the sink for several seconds. The kitchen clock ticked. Snow fell outside the window. Finally, he said, "If something ever happened to me, I need you to trust yourself." I laughed softly. "Robert, you're healthier than I am." But he didn't smile. He simply looked at me. There was sadness in his eyes that I still cannot forget. Several weeks later, he began organizing papers. He went through old boxes in the attic. He labeled folders. He spent hours in his study. Once I walked into the room and saw photographs spread across his desk. He covered them quickly. "What are those old bank files?" I accepted the answer. Because that's what wives sometimes do after many years. We stop asking questions because we believe love has already answered them. The morning Robert died was ordinary. He drank coffee. He fed the birds outside. He kissed me before leaving for town. "I won't be long," he said. Those were his last words to me. He suffered a heart attack that evening. By the time the ambulance reached him, it was too late. I remember sitting in the hospital hallway while Emily held my hand. Michael paced back and forth. Doctors spoke softly. Machines beeped. The world became strangely quiet. At 70 years old, I suddenly became a widow. The next 4 days passed in a blur of casseroles, sympathy cards, flowers, and visitors. Everyone spoke about Robert's kindness. Everyone said he had been a good man. And I agreed. Because despite the strange phone calls, the locked drawer, the secret worries, and the sadness in his eyes, I still believed I knew my husband. I still believed that whatever troubled him would disappear with his passing. I had no idea that Robert had left part of his life hidden from me. I had no idea that somewhere a woman named Linda Parker was waiting for a phone call. And I certainly had no idea that my husband's secret telephone was lying beside him inside the funeral home, waiting to ring. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday morning in early October. The sky above our small Ohio town looked as though it had been painted with ashes. The trees had already begun losing their leaves, and a cold wind pushed against the stained glass windows of St. Andrew's Church. I remember almost every detail. The scent of lilies, the sound of quiet footsteps on the wooden floor, the soft organ music, the weight of my black coat. Most of all, I remember how empty the world felt. For 4 days, people had come to my house carrying casseroles, flowers, sympathy cards, and stories about Robert. Everyone seemed to know a different version of my husband. He helped me when my father died. He stayed late at work to train me. He fixed my porch for free. He visited my husband in the hospital. Each story made me proud. Each story also made me realize how many pieces of Robert belonged to other people. But I still believed the largest piece belonged to me. I sat in the front pew beside Emily. Daniel sat next to her. Michael and his wife Rachel sat on my other side. Our grandchildren occupied the second row. The church was nearly full. Robert had been respected in our town. Pastor Benjamin stood near the altar holding his Bible. His voice was calm and warm. Robert Murray was a faithful husband, father, grandfather, and friend. I stared at the polished wooden casket. Robert looked peaceful. The funeral home had dressed him in his favorite charcoal gray suit, the same suit he had worn to Emily's wedding nearly 15 years earlier. His hands rested quietly across his chest. His wedding ring still sat on his finger. I wanted to reach forward and touch his hand one last time. Part of me still expected him to wake up. Grief does strange things to the human mind. You know someone is gone, yet your heart continues searching for them. Pastor Benjamin spoke about love. He spoke about forgiveness. He spoke about faith. The congregation lowered their heads. I closed my eyes. And then I heard it. A soft musical ringtone. At first I thought someone had forgotten to silence their phone. The sound stopped. The church remained quiet. Pastor Benjamin continued speaking. Several seconds later, the ringtone returned. Longer this time. Closer. My eyes opened. People began looking around. Someone in the back shifted uncomfortably. The ringtone continued. My heart suddenly began beating faster. The sound wasn't coming from the pews. It wasn't coming from someone's purse. It was coming from the front of the church, from the casket. I turned toward Robert. The music continued. Emily looked at me. Mom? Michael immediately stood up. His face had gone pale. I'll handle it, he said quickly. Something about his voice felt wrong. Too quick. Too nervous. He moved toward the casket, but I reached his arm. What are you doing? It's probably nothing. Nothing, I whispered. Your father's phone is ringing. Michael swallowed. Dad had an old work phone. I stared at him. What phone? He avoided my eyes. Before I could ask another question, the ringing stopped. The entire church had fallen silent. Pastor Benjamin cleared his throat. We can take a moment. People exchanged confused looks. Rachel looked at her husband. Emily looked at me. I felt suddenly cold. Robert had never carried two phones. Not in 38 years. He barely used the one I knew about. He hated technology. He forgot passwords. He wrote appointments on paper calendars. The idea that he owned another phone made no sense. Then it rang again. This time, I heard the vibration. It came directly from the inside pocket of Robert's suit jacket. Several people gasped quietly. Michael moved again. I'll get it. No? My own voice surprised me. It sounded stronger than I felt. Michael stopped. Mom, please. No! I stepped forward. My hands were shaking. The funeral director approached. Mrs. Murray. I'll answer it. No one argued. Perhaps everyone was too shocked. Perhaps everyone understood that after 38 years of marriage, that phone belonged to me more than anyone else. I leaned toward the casket. For a brief moment, I forgot about the church. I forgot about the people watching. All I could see was Robert, my husband, the man I had loved for nearly 4 decades. The ringtone stopped again. The screen was still glowing inside his jacket pocket. I reached inside and pulled out a small black cell phone. I had never seen it before. It wasn't his regular phone. This one was newer, smaller. The screen displayed only one word. Linda. The phone began ringing again. My fingers trembled. Michael suddenly stepped beside me. Mom, don't answer. I turned toward him. His face looked terrified, not surprised, terrified. Why? I asked. He opened his mouth, but said nothing. Emily stood up. Mom, if you want to answer it, answer it. The entire church seemed to stop breathing. I pressed the green button. Hello. There was silence. Only breathing. Then a woman's voice spoke. Robert? I couldn't answer. She continued. Robert, did you tell Adriana where you hid it? My blood turned cold. The church disappeared around me. What? The woman became quiet. Who is this? This is Adriana Murray. Several seconds passed. The woman inhaled sharply. Oh my God. Who are you? Her voice trembled. My name is Linda Parker. Why are you calling my husband? No answer. I looked at Robert's body. My husband lay motionless only inches away. The woman finally spoke. I'm so sorry. How do you know my husband? Another silence. Then she said words that would change my life. He ran out of time. My knees weakened. Emily rushed forward and held my arm. What does that mean? I asked. Linda's voice sounded frightened. Did he leave you the envelope? What envelope? He said he would explain everything. I felt the entire room watching me. Michael looked as though he could barely stand. Rachel stared at him. Pastor Benjamin remained beside the altar. No one moved. No one spoke. I asked again. What envelope? Linda whispered. Adriana, please don't let Michael find it first. My eyes immediately turned toward my son. His face had become completely white. Who is this woman? I asked. I can't explain over the phone. Then explain now. She hesitated. Robert wanted to protect you. Protect me? From what? From whom? I looked down at my husband. Suddenly, I remembered the locked desk, the secret calls, the sadness in his eyes, the strange conversations with Michael, the sentence he had spoken months earlier. If something ever happened to me, I need you to trust yourself. Linda spoke one final sentence. I think Robert knew he was running out of time. The line went dead. The church remained silent. The funeral had stopped. People sat frozen in their seats. I looked at the secret phone in my hand. Then I looked at my son. For the first time in his life, Michael could not meet my eyes. And at that moment, standing beside my husband's casket, I realized that the man I had buried might have been carrying secrets far heavier than the one hidden inside his suit pocket. The funeral ended nearly 40 minutes late. People left the church quietly speaking in whispers, as though they had witnessed something they were not supposed to see. Some hugged me, some avoided my eyes. Others glanced at Michael with expressions I couldn't quite understand. I barely heard any of them. The black phone still rested in my hands. It felt heavier than it should have. Robert's casket had already been moved outside toward the hearse. The October wind had grown colder, carrying dead leaves across the church parking lot. Emily stood beside me while Daniel spoke with the funeral director. Michael approached. Mom, give me the phone. I looked up. His voice was calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Why? It's Dad's. We can deal with it later. I held the phone tighter. Our father just died, he said. This isn't the time. No, I answered quietly. This is exactly the time. For a moment, his expression changed. Not grief, not sadness, fear. Before he could respond, Rachel stepped beside him. Maybe Adriana should keep it. Michael turned toward his wife. You don't understand. Rachel crossed her arms. Then explain. He looked trapped. I just don't want Mom upset. I almost laughed. I had buried my husband that morning. A strange woman had called his secret phone during his funeral. I was already upset. Emily placed her hand on my shoulder. Mom, let's go home. The ride back to my house was almost silent. I rode with Emily and Daniel. Michael followed behind us with Rachel. As we drove through town, I looked out the window at places Robert and I had visited for years. The diner where we ate breakfast every Sunday. The hardware store where he bought birdseed. The pharmacy where he picked up my medication. Everything looked the same. Only my life had changed. When we arrived home, neighbors had already left food on the kitchen counter. Flowers covered nearly every surface in the dining room. The house smelled of coffee and lilies. I hated lilies. Robert had known that. Yet they surrounded me now. Emily helped remove my coat. "You should sit down." Instead, I walked directly to Robert's recliner. The chair still held the shape of his body. The television remote rested beside it. His reading glasses sat on the small table. I picked them up, and suddenly, I began crying. Not because of the phone, not because of Linda, because for one brief second, I had forgotten he was gone. Emily knelt beside me. "Oh, Mom." I could barely breathe. 38 years. 38 years beside one man. And now I was sitting in his chair, holding a phone that proved I didn't know everything about him. An hour later, Michael entered the living room. Rachel remained in the kitchen. Daniel had taken the grandchildren home. Only the three of us remained. "Mom." I looked up. "What?" "I think you should delete whatever is on that phone." Emily immediately turned toward him. "What?" Michael sighed. "Dad's gone. Whatever this is, it doesn't matter anymore." I stared at my son. "You know who Linda is." "No." "You're lying." His face darkened. "I'm not lying." Emily spoke quietly. "Then why did you try to stop Mom from answering?" Michael rubbed his forehead. "Because it was a funeral." "No," I said, "because you were scared." He stood up. "I'm not doing this today." He started toward the door. "Michael." He stopped. "Did your father tell you about Linda?" Several seconds passed. He didn't turn around. Finally, he said, "Dad worried too much." Then he left. The front door closed. The house became quiet. Emily looked at me. "He knows something." "I know." "What are you going to do?" I looked at the phone. The screen remained dark. "I want to call her." Emily nodded. "Then call her." My hands shook as I found the number in the recent calls. Linda Parker. Only one number. No photographs. No messages visible on the lock screen. I pressed the button. The phone rang twice. She answered. "Hello?" "This is Adriana Murray." Silence. "I didn't think you'd call so soon." "I need answers." "I know." "Who are you?" She hesitated. "My name is Linda Parker." "I know your name." Another silence. Outside, wind rattled the kitchen window. Emily sat quietly beside me. I could hear Linda breathing. Finally, I asked the question that had been growing inside me since the church. "Were you having an affair with my husband?" The words felt like broken glass. Linda inhaled sharply. "No." "Then why did he have a secret phone? I can't explain everything over the phone." "You called him during his funeral." "I didn't know he had died." My heart skipped. "What? He was supposed to call me 2 days ago." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What do you mean?" "He said if he didn't call, something had gone wrong." Emily looked at me. I placed the call on speaker. Linda continued. "He said time was running out." I remembered the sadness in Robert's eyes. The late-night phone calls. The locked drawer. What envelope? I asked. The woman became quiet again. He didn't leave it. No. Oh, God. Tell me. I promised Robert I wouldn't involve you unless he asked me to. Well, he can't ask now. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said something unexpected. Your husband loved you very much, Adriana. Tears filled my eyes. You don't know that. Yes, I do. How? Because everything he did was for you. I looked at Emily. Neither of us understood. Linda continued. Robert became worried several months ago. About what? I can't discuss that over the phone. My patience disappeared. My husband is dead. I know. My family is falling apart. I know. Then stop speaking in riddles. I heard her breathing. Finally, she said, Is Michael there? My stomach tightened. No. Good. Emily sat upright. Why? Linda lowered her voice. Because Robert specifically told me not to discuss any of this around your son. The room became silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop. I spoke slowly. Why? She answered just as carefully. Because Robert was afraid. Of Michael. I didn't say that. But you meant it. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, Adriana, do you remember the old storage building outside Mill Creek Road? I frowned. The one near the railroad tracks. Yes. Robert rented that years ago. He still had it. I looked at Emily. Her eyes widened. He never told me. I know. What is inside? Linda took a long breath. Documents. What kind of documents? The kind your husband thought you might need someday. My pulse quickened. What documents? She said 4 words that made my entire body go cold. Financial records and signatures. I stood up. Signatures. Robert discovered something. What? I can't tell you everything. Then tell me enough. Another pause. Then she spoke the sentence that would keep me awake the entire night. Your husband believed someone in your family was trying to take something that belonged to you. I could barely breathe. Who? Linda whispered. Please don't let Michael get to the storage unit first. The call ended. Emily stared at me. I stared at the phone. Outside, headlights suddenly appeared through the front window. A truck had pulled into my driveway, Michael's truck, and for the first time in my son's life, I was afraid of what he might ask me. Michael stood at the front door with his truck headlights shining through the living room window. For a moment, nobody moved. Emily sat beside me on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The secret phone still rested on the coffee table between us. Outside, the engine of Michael's truck continued running. He came back too quickly, Emily said softly. I nodded. He was already driving here before Linda ended the call. The thought made my stomach tighten. How much did my son know? And why did my husband's friend seem more afraid of Michael than of anyone else? The front door opened before either of us could speak. Michael stepped inside. His face looked tired, but his eyes immediately found the black phone on the table. Mom. His voice was calm, too calm. Can we talk? Emily crossed her arms. We've been talking all afternoon. Michael ignored her. He sat across from me and leaned forward. I know today has been difficult. Difficult, Emily said. He looked at his sister. Please. No, she answered. You don't get to act like everything is normal. Michael rubbed his forehead. I just don't want Mom upset. I looked directly at him. Who is Linda Parker? His eyes flickered. I don't know. You do. I don't. I picked up the phone. She told me Dad didn't want you involved. For the first time, genuine panic crossed his face. What exactly did she say? Emily immediately noticed it too. Interesting question, she said. Michael stood up. I think this woman is manipulating you. How? I don't know. You know her name. No. You knew Dad had another phone. He opened his mouth, closed it. Finally, he said, Dad mentioned it once. When? A few months ago. And you never told me. I didn't think it mattered. I stared at my son. When Michael was little, he could never lie successfully. His ears turned red whenever he hid something. At 42 years old, they were turning red again. Rachel entered from the kitchen carrying coffee. She placed the cups on the table. Michael, maybe you should tell your mother the truth. He looked at her sharply. What truth? Rachel hesitated. I suddenly realized she was afraid. Not of me, of her husband. Rachel, I asked gently. She looked down at her hands. Michael and Robert argued several times. The room became silent. Emily slowly turned toward her brother. Over the summer, Rachel said. Michael stood. Enough. No, I answered quietly. Not enough, Rachel continued. I heard them one night. Michael's face hardened. Rachel. She ignored him. Robert said he wouldn't sign something. My heart began beating faster. What was he supposed to sign? I don't know. Michael slammed his hand against the table. Everybody stop. No one spoke. He looked at me. Dad worried too much. The same sentence. The exact same sentence he had used earlier. What did he worry about? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the phone. Give me the phone, Mom. No. Please. No. His voice grew louder. You don't know what you're doing. I stood slowly. I'm 70 years old, Michael. I've buried my husband. I know exactly what I'm doing. For several seconds, neither of us moved. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. Finally, Emily spoke. Mom, maybe you should stay with us tonight. Michael turned immediately. That's ridiculous. Why? Because she's fine. I don't think she is. I'm her son. And I'm her daughter. I suddenly felt exhausted. The entire day had become one long nightmare. My husband's funeral, the secret phone, Linda, the hidden storage building, and now my children standing in my living room like strangers. Everyone stop, I said. The room fell quiet. I looked at Michael. Did your father trust you? He seemed surprised. Of course. Then why did he tell Linda not to discuss this around you? His face lost color. Rachel looked at him. Emily looked at him. No one spoke. Finally, he said quietly, I don't know. But even he didn't believe it. He picked up his jacket. I'll come by tomorrow. Michael? He stopped at the door. If you know something, tell me now. His shoulders tightened. For a moment, I thought he might speak. Instead, he said, Dad wasn't perfect. Then, he walked outside. The truck engine started. Several seconds later, he disappeared down the road. Rachel remained. She sat beside me. I'm sorry. For what? Her eyes filled with tears. For not saying something sooner. What should you have said? She wiped her eyes. Michael's business hasn't been doing well. I looked at Emily. Neither of us had known. He lost money last year. How much? I don't know. Did Robert know? She nodded. He helped him. When? Several times. I felt cold. Robert and I had shared the same checking account for years. We discussed every expense, or at least I thought we did. How much money? Rachel looked ashamed. Tens of thousands. Emily stared. What? He kept saying things would improve. When was this? Over the past 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of secrets. 2 years of late-night conversations. 2 years of worries. Suddenly, many things began making sense. The tension at Christmas. The arguments in the garage. Robert's sadness. His fear. Rachel continued. Michael said his father didn't understand business. Emily laughed bitterly. Apparently, Dad understood more than any of us. The house became quiet again. Outside, darkness had settled over the neighborhood. Emily finally stood. Mom, you're not staying here alone. I'll be fine. No. Rachel nodded. I agree. I looked around my living room. Robert's chair, his glasses, his books, the blanket he used every winter. Everything still felt full of him. I don't want to leave. Emily sat beside me again. Then I'll stay. I reached for her hand. For the first time all day, I felt something close to safety. Later that evening, after Rachel had left and Emily had made tea, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The secret phone lay beside me. I turned it over. No lock screen photographs. No personal messages visible. Only a battery indicator. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. A passcode. 6 digits. I entered Robert's birthday. Wrong. I tried our anniversary. Wrong. I tried Michael's birthday. Wrong. Emily sat beside me. What would Dad use? I thought for several seconds. Robert hated passwords. He always used numbers that meant something. Our wedding anniversary, the children's birthdays, his retirement date. Then I remembered something. The day he proposed, June 14th, 1987. I entered the numbers. The phone unlocked. Emily gasped. My own breath stopped. The screen opened. Messages, photographs, notes, bank records. And at the very top of the screen was a single message pinned above everything else. It had been sent by Robert. The message contained only one sentence. If something happens to me, Adriana must know the truth. I looked at my daughter. She looked at me. Outside, the wind shook the trees. Inside the kitchen, my dead husband's secret life had just opened in my hands. I stared at the message on Robert's phone for a very long time. If something happens to me, Adriana must know the truth. The kitchen suddenly felt colder. Emily sat beside me, her hand covering her mouth. Neither of us spoke. Outside, the October wind pushed branches against the windows, creating soft scratching sounds that seemed unnaturally loud. My husband had written that message. Not weeks ago, not years ago. The date showed it had been written only 6 days before he died. Emily finally whispered, "Mom." I looked at her. What if Dad knew something was wrong? I didn't answer, because part of me had already begun wondering the same thing. Robert had suffered a heart attack. That was what the doctors told us. At 70 years old, heart attacks happened. But why had he said time was running out? Why had he hidden a second phone? Why had he trusted another woman with secrets he never shared with me? And why was he afraid of our son? I opened the message application. There were dozens of conversations. Most had been deleted. Only 3 remained. One belonged to Linda. Another had no name. The third was Robert's own saved notes. Emily leaned closer. Read Linda's messages. I hesitated. For nearly 40 years, I had never read my husband's private conversations. Marriage had always been built on trust. But the man who had died 4 days earlier had apparently been living part of his life in secret. I opened the conversation. The earliest message had been sent 7 months before. Linda, he asked again today. Robert, I won't sign. Linda, you need to tell Adriana. Robert, not yet. I felt my stomach tighten. There were dozens of similar messages. Linda, he's getting desperate. Robert, I know. Linda James says you need documentation. Robert, I'm collecting everything. Another. Linda, did he threaten legal action? Robert, not directly. Linda, you cannot wait forever. Robert, I know. Emily read silently beside me. Finally, she whispered, They're talking about Michael. I think so. One message had been sent only 2 days before Robert died. Linda, did you finally rent the unit, Robert? Yes. Linda, did you leave the envelope, Robert? Not yet. Linda, Robert, you don't have time. Robert, I know. I closed my eyes. Those same words again. I know. I know. I know. What had my husband known? Emily touched my arm. Open the photographs. I opened the image folder. There were dozens of pictures. Some showed documents. Others showed file folders. Several displayed a small storage building. One picture stopped my breathing. It was Michael. My son stood beside a desk holding papers. The photograph had been taken secretly from a distance. Why would Dad photograph Michael? Emily asked. I zoomed in. Michael appeared angry. He was pointing at something. Across from him sat Robert. Neither man looked happy. Another picture. Michael leaving the house at night. Another. A stack of papers. Several signatures. Bank documents. I didn't understand most of it. Robert had always handled financial matters. I trusted him completely. Perhaps that was why he had tried to protect me. Emily opened another image. A signature. My signature. I stared. It looked like my handwriting, but I had never signed that paper. What is this? Emily frowned. It says property transfer. My heart skipped. The document mentioned our house. Our home. The house Robert and I owned together. My signature appeared at the bottom, but I had never signed it. Never. I felt suddenly dizzy. No. Emily looked at me. Mom. I never signed that. She stared at the document again. Are you sure? I would remember. The room began spinning. My signature. On a document involving our house. Why? For what purpose? I continued scrolling. Another document. Another signature. Again, my name. Again, I had never seen it. Emily looked frightened. Could someone have forged it? I couldn't answer, because I didn't want to think the answer might be yes. The next folder contained voice recordings. Robert had labeled them with dates. I selected the most recent. For several seconds, there was only static. Then I heard Robert's voice, my husband's voice. Alive. Tired. If you're listening to this, Adriana, something happened before I could explain everything. My eyes filled with tears. Emily immediately squeezed my hand. Robert continued. I don't know if this recording will ever matter, but if it does, you need to trust Linda. I looked at my daughter. Neither of us moved. Robert coughed. I wanted to protect you. Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I waited too long. The recording ended. Only 30 seconds. 30 seconds from a dead man. I covered my face. Emily began crying. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Eventually, she asked, Do you think Dad knew he was dying? No. But he sounded afraid. He did. Not physically afraid. Not afraid of death. Afraid of something else. I opened the notes application. There were only 3 notes. The first read, Locker paid through December. The second, talk to James if necessary. The third, Adriana deserves peace. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Even in the middle of secrets, Robert had been thinking about me. But why hadn't he simply told me? Emily suddenly sat upright. James? What? The note says James. I frowned. Our lawyer, attorney James Whitmore, had handled our wills for years. He and Robert had played golf together. Could he know something? The clock showed nearly midnight. Too late to call. Too late for answers. But not too late for fear. Suddenly, the phone rang. Both of us jumped. The caller ID showed Linda. I answered immediately. Linda, are you alone? No, Emily is with me. A brief silence. Did you open the phone? Yes. Did you see the documents? My voice shook. Some of them. Did you find the signatures? I looked at the screen. Yes. Then Robert was right. What does that mean? Linda sighed. I was afraid of this. Emily spoke. Afraid of what? Linda lowered her voice. Someone tried to move your mother's assets. My chest tightened. What assets? The house. The savings account. The retirement accounts. I felt the blood leave my face. What? Robert discovered irregular paperwork several months ago. Who did it? She hesitated. Robert suspected Michael. The kitchen became silent. Emily covered her mouth. No, I whispered. I wish I were wrong. Do you have proof? Some. Where? The storage unit. The same answer. Always the storage unit. I stood. I want to go tomorrow. Go early. Why? Another pause. Because Robert believed someone else knew about it. Michael. I don't know. But you suspect him. She didn't answer. Finally, she said, Adriana, did Michael know the phone was unlocked? No. Good. Why? Because if Robert was right, those files are dangerous. The call ended. Emily looked terrified. So what do we do? I stared at the photographs, the forged signatures, the messages. My husband's voice. For the first time in my life, I felt caught between my husband and my son. One was dead. One was hiding something. And somehow in the middle of it all, I had become the person Robert wanted to protect. I looked at Emily. We go to the storage unit tomorrow. She nodded. Outside, the wind continued blowing through the trees. Upstairs, Robert's side of the bed remained empty. And downstairs, inside his secret phone, my husband had left me a trail of truths that I wasn't sure I was strong enough to follow. I slept less than 2 hours that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Robert's face inside the casket. Then I heard Linda's voice. Please don't let Michael get there first. The words repeated themselves again and again. At 6 o'clock the following morning, I was already sitting at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. Outside, a light rain had begun falling over our neighborhood, coating the windows with tiny silver drops. Robert usually woke before sunrise. For 38 years, he had made coffee while I slept. That morning, I made it alone. His favorite mug still sat beside the coffee maker. I almost reached for it before stopping myself. Grief has strange habits. Your hands remember what your heart is trying to forget. Emily came downstairs around 6:30. She looked exhausted. Did you sleep? A little. She sat across from me. Are we really doing this? I looked toward Robert's phone. Yes, the storage unit sat outside town near Mill Creek Road, beside abandoned railroad tracks and an old grain warehouse that had been empty for years. Robert had rented the building decades earlier to store furniture after his parents died. At least, that was what I remembered. Apparently, he had never given it up. By 7:30, we were in Emily's car. The roads were wet. The sky remained gray. As the town disappeared behind us, I felt my stomach tightening. I didn't know what frightened me more, finding something or finding nothing. Emily finally spoke. Do you think Michael knows where we're going? I don't know. Should we tell him? No. The answer came quickly. Too quickly. The truth shocked me. For the first time in my life, I didn't trust my own son. That realization hurt more than any secret Robert had kept. We turned onto Mill Creek Road. The storage buildings appeared in the distance. There were only 6 units, all constructed from faded metal with rusted doors and broken security lights. Weeds grew along the fences. The place looked abandoned. Emily parked. Rain tapped against the windshield. Neither of us moved. Finally, she said, Ready? No. I wasn't ready, but I nodded anyway. The cold air hit us immediately. The storage unit stood near the back. Unit 14. The number matched one of the notes in Robert's phone. Locker paid through December. My hands shook as I inserted the key we had found attached to Robert's keyring. The lock clicked. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Emily slowly raised the metal door. The sound echoed through the empty property. Inside, I saw shelves, boxes, file cabinets, and an old wooden desk. The room smelled of paper and dust. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling. Emily switched it on. The yellow light revealed something unexpected. The room was organized, very organized. Every box had labels, dates, names, folders. This wasn't random storage. This was a workspace, a place Robert had visited often. My eyes filled with tears. For months, perhaps years, my husband had come here alone, and I never knew. On the desk sat a framed photograph. It was our family picture from Emily's wedding. Robert had placed it there. I touched the frame. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Emily walked toward a filing cabinet. Mom. I turned. The top drawer stood partially open. Inside were folders. One of them carried my name. Adriana Murray. Another. Property. Another. Michael. My heart began racing. Before we could open them, Emily suddenly froze. What is it? She pointed toward the floor. Near the door. Mud. Fresh mud. Boot prints. Someone had been there recently. Very recently. The rain outside had only started overnight. The footprints were still wet. I felt cold. We aren't the first people here. Emily looked toward the door. Maybe Dad came recently. No, I pointed. The footprints led inward and back out. After the rain, someone had been inside after Robert died. The room suddenly felt dangerous. Emily whispered, "Michael, I don't know." But I was already thinking it. We carefully opened the cabinet. The folder marked Michael contained bank statements, loan documents, investment records. Several pages carried large red stamps. Past due, default. Final notice. Emily looked shocked. Oh my God. I sat down in the chair. The amount of debt exceeded $300,000. My son. My successful son. The man who drove expensive trucks. The man who wore designer suits. The man who spoke about business opportunities. He was drowning. Another folder contained copies of our retirement accounts. Robert had highlighted several transactions. Transfers, withdrawals, attempts. There were handwritten notes. Michael asked again, "Do not approve. Check signatures." I felt my hands growing numb. Emily opened another envelope. Inside lay copies of documents I had seen on the phone. My forged signatures. Several pages. Some were incomplete. Others appeared ready to file. I looked at my own name. Adriana Murray, written perfectly. Except I had never written it. Emily sat beside me. "Mom." I could barely speak. "He tried to use my name." Neither of us said who. We didn't need to. At that moment, footsteps echoed outside. Emily stood immediately. My heart nearly stopped. The footsteps came closer. Someone was outside the unit. The shadow appeared beneath the door. For one terrible second, I thought it was Michael. The figure stepped into view. A woman, gray hair, dark coat, around 60 years old. She looked as frightened as we were. "Adriana?" I stood. "Linda." She nodded. For several seconds, nobody moved. This was the woman who had called during my husband's funeral. The woman whose voice had changed my life. She slowly entered. Her eyes moved across the room, the cabinets, the desk, the files. Then tears filled her eyes. "He really brought you here." I stared at her. "You knew about this place." "Yes." "How long?" "About 6 months." Emily folded her arms. "Who are you?" Linda looked directly at me. "My name is Linda Parker. I worked with Robert at the bank for 23 years. She walked toward the desk. "He rented this place after he discovered the paperwork." "What paperwork?" She opened a folder. Inside were copies of my signatures. "He believed someone was trying to transfer assets without your knowledge." "Michael?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the floor, at the muddy footprints. Her expression changed. "Someone was here." "We know." "When?" "This morning, maybe." She became pale. "What is it?" Linda walked quickly toward a shelf. She reached behind several boxes. Then she froze. The space was empty. Her breathing changed. "What's wrong?" She looked at me. "There was another file." "What file?" "The original documents." My stomach dropped. "Where are they?" She swallowed. "They're gone." The three of us stood in silence. Outside, rain continued falling against the metal roof. Inside, the truth had finally begun appearing. But so had something even more frightening. Someone knew about Robert's secret. Someone had come before us. And someone had taken exactly the files that could prove what had happened. Linda looked directly at me. Adriana. What? Her voice trembled. I think we're too late. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The rain hammered against the metal roof above us, creating a steady rhythm that somehow made the silence even heavier. I looked at the empty space behind the boxes. Someone had taken the original files. The proof. The documents Robert had apparently protected for months. Linda slowly sat down in the chair beside the desk. She suddenly looked older than she had only minutes before. Emily crossed her arms. You need to tell us everything. Linda nodded. You're right. I sat opposite her. The small storage unit suddenly felt like a courtroom. And perhaps it was. My husband was gone, but his secrets remained. Linda looked at me. I met Robert in 1989. I frowned. At the bank? She nodded. We worked together for over 20 years. Why didn't I know you? You met me once. I tried to remember. She smiled sadly. At the bank Christmas party, you and Robert danced. A distant memory returned. A woman with short brown hair, a blue dress, a polite conversation, 30 years ago. I don't remember. Most people wouldn't. Emily leaned forward. Were you and my father having an affair? Linda looked directly at her. No. The answer came immediately. Without hesitation. Without guilt. No, she repeated. Your father loved your mother more than anyone I've ever known. I wanted to believe her. Part of me already did. But another part still hurt. Then why the secrecy? I asked. Linda folded her hands. Because Robert didn't know who he could trust. The words hung in the air. Emily spoke quietly. Not even Mom. Linda looked at me. He wanted to protect her. From what? She reached into her purse. Inside was a worn envelope. She placed it on the desk. Robert's handwriting covered the front. Linda only if necessary. My heart nearly stopped. You had this? He gave it to me 6 months ago. Why? He said if anything happened to him, I might need to explain things. I stared at my husband's handwriting. Even after 38 years, I could recognize every letter. Linda continued. About 8 months ago, Robert asked me to look at some financial records. What kind? Your retirement account. Emily frowned. What was wrong? There were authorization requests. I looked at her. I don't understand. Someone was attempting to move assets. Legally? No. The room became silent again. Linda continued. Some signatures didn't match. I felt cold. My signatures? She nodded. Yes. I looked toward the folders, the forged documents, the papers, the notes. Everything suddenly felt real. When Robert discovered it, he became frightened. Of Michael? She sighed. He didn't want to believe it. Neither did I, even now. Even after the evidence. Michael was my son, the little boy who used to sleep beside me during thunderstorms, the teenager who cried when our dog died, the man who carried my groceries every Sunday. How could he become someone capable of stealing from his parents? Linda continued. Robert confronted him. Emily immediately looked up. When? Several times. I remembered the arguments, the Christmas tension, the garage, the closed doors, Robert's sadness. He told me Michael was in trouble. What kind of trouble? Debt. I nodded. Rachel told us. Linda looked surprised. She knows some of it. There is more. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it, but I asked anyway. How much debt? Linda hesitated. Over $400,000. Emily gasped. I felt my hands trembling. 400,000. The number didn't seem real. How? Failed investments, business loans, credit lines. He borrowed repeatedly. I closed my eyes. Michael had always wanted success. Bigger houses, better cars, expensive vacations, things Robert never cared about. Robert once told him, "A peaceful life is worth more than an expensive one." Michael laughed. He said his father didn't understand ambition. Perhaps Robert understood it too well. Linda opened another folder. Inside lay copies of emails, bank correspondence, legal notices. Several carried Michael's name. Robert began collecting evidence. Why? He hoped Michael would stop. And if he didn't, she looked at me. Robert wanted to protect your home. Tears filled my eyes. Our home. The small house where we raised children. Where we celebrated birthdays. Where Robert proposed to me in the kitchen after our anniversary dinner because he couldn't afford a restaurant. He had been fighting for it. Quietly. Alone. I whispered, "Why didn't he tell me?" Linda's eyes softened. He wanted to. When? Many times. Then why didn't he? She looked down. Because he knew what it would do to you. The truth hurt. Because she was right. Even now, sitting inside that storage unit, I felt something breaking inside me. Not my trust in Robert. My trust in my own son. Emily finally asked the question neither of us wanted. Did Dad think Michael would hurt Mom? Linda became very quiet. No. But he thought Michael had become desperate. The word echoed inside me. Desperate people do things they never imagined. I had seen it before. Friends who lost homes, neighbors who lost jobs, families destroyed by money. But never my family, never my son. Linda looked toward the empty shelf. The missing file contained the originals, the forged signatures, the banking records, the lawyer's notes. My heart sank. Who knew they were here? Robert. Myself. She hesitated. And Michael. Emily stood. What? Linda looked ashamed. Robert told him about the unit. I felt dizzy. Why? He wanted to give him one last chance. My voice shook. What happened? Michael promised he would fix everything. And did he? Linda didn't answer. Outside, the rain had begun slowing. The silence inside the unit became almost unbearable. Then Linda reached into her purse again. She removed a small photograph. It showed Robert sitting at this very desk. The picture had been taken only weeks earlier. He looked tired, older, but he was smiling. Beside the photograph was a folded note. For Adriana. My breathing stopped. He gave this to me 2 weeks ago. Why didn't you give it to me? He told me not to unless the files disappeared. Emily looked at me. The files had disappeared. My hands trembled as I took the note. Robert's handwriting. Again. Always his handwriting. I slowly unfolded the paper. Only one sentence appeared. If you are reading this, I waited too long. My eyes filled with tears. Linda's voice broke. He blamed himself. For what? For choosing silence. I sat there for several minutes. The rain had almost stopped. The clouds outside had begun to brighten. And for the first time since Robert died, I understood something. He hadn't hidden secrets because he stopped loving me. He had hidden them because he was trying to save me. Perhaps he was wrong. Perhaps he should have trusted me. but every decision he made had been driven by love. Emily suddenly looked toward the open door. "Mom!" I turned. A truck was slowly entering the storage lot. Dark blue. Large. Familiar. My heart stopped. Michael's truck. It rolled closer. Closer. Then stopped beside Unit 14. The driver's door opened. My son stepped out, and when he saw Linda standing beside me, the color drained from his face. Michael stopped beside his truck. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the storage building. The wind had nearly disappeared, leaving only a heavy silence between us. My son looked first at me, then at Emily, then at Linda. When his eyes settled on her, something inside him seemed to collapse. "Linda." He didn't sound surprised. He sounded defeated. Emily stepped forward. "So you do know her." Michael remained silent. Linda stood beside the desk. For the first time since I had met her, she looked angry. "You shouldn't be here." Michael laughed bitterly. "My father said the same thing." I felt my heart sink. He knew. All along he had known. I looked at him. "You lied to me." His eyes moved toward me. "Mom." "You looked me in the face and lied." His shoulders fell. "I was trying to protect you." The words almost made me laugh. Robert had used the same excuse. Only one of them was dead, and one of them had been hiding debt. Emily crossed her arms. "Protect Mom from what?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, his eyes moved around the storage unit, the shelves, the files, the empty space where the missing folder had been. His face changed. "Someone already came here." Linda stepped forward. "Did you?" His eyes flashed. "No." "Then who?" "I don't know." I wanted to believe him, but I no longer knew how. For 42 years, Michael had been my son. For 4 days, he had been a stranger. I held Robert's note tightly. "If you are reading this, I waited too long." Perhaps Robert had. Perhaps all of us had. Michael looked at me. "What did Dad leave?" "Nothing for you." His expression hardened. "Mom." "No." I surprised myself. The old Adriana, the woman who avoided conflict, who kept peace, who made excuses, seemed to be disappearing. The woman standing inside that storage unit had buried her husband 4 days earlier. She no longer had the strength to protect everyone else. "What did you ask your father to sign?" Michael looked away. "Nothing." Emily laughed. "Stop lying." He turned toward her. "You think you know everything?" "No, but apparently Dad did." Silence. Then Linda spoke. "Tell your mother the truth." Michael stared at her. "You shouldn't be involved." "I became involved when Robert asked me to." He shook his head. "You never liked me." "No, I didn't like your decisions." He looked exhausted, older. For the first time in years, I noticed how tired my son appeared. The expensive clothes, the expensive truck, the expensive watch. They suddenly looked like costumes. I asked quietly, "How much do you owe?" He didn't answer. Linda did. "Over $400,000. Michael turned sharply. "You had no right." She didn't move. "Your father deserved to know." I looked at my son. "Is it true?" Several seconds passed. Finally, he nodded. Emily sat down heavily. "Oh my God." I could barely breathe. "How?" He rubbed his face. "The company failed." "What company?" "The investment group." "You said it was doing well." I lied. "When For 2 years. 2 years. The same amount of time Robert had been hiding things. Only now I understood. One man hid secrets to protect. Another hid secrets to survive. Michael continued speaking. The market collapsed. The partners disappeared. I borrowed money. Then I borrowed more. His voice had become quiet, almost ashamed. I thought I could fix it. I asked the question I had been afraid to ask. Did you forge my signature? His eyes closed. The answer appeared before the words. Mom, did you? He looked at the floor. Only once. Emily stood immediately. Only once. He raised his voice. I wasn't trying to steal from her. Then what were you doing? I needed collateral. My body felt cold. Our house... He nodded. The bank wouldn't approve anything. So you used me. I planned to replace everything. The room exploded. Emily began crying. Linda looked away. I could not move. My son had used my name, my signature, my home, the house where Robert and I had built our entire life. I whispered Robert knew. Michael nodded. He found the paperwork. When? Last winter. And he confronted me. Images suddenly returned. The arguments, Christmas, the garage, the sadness. Robert had known for months, perhaps longer. Did he threaten you? No. What did he do? Michael laughed bitterly. He gave me chances. How many? Too many. Linda spoke quietly. He kept believing you would stop. Michael sat in the chair beside the desk. For the first time since Robert died, he looked like a frightened little boy. I thought I could save the business. There was no business anymore. His voice cracked. I know. Tears appeared in his eyes. I had not seen my son cry since his father's funeral. And even then, I wasn't sure whether he cried from grief or fear. Emily asked softly, Did Dad think you would hurt Mom? Michael looked horrified. No. Then why was he afraid? He stared at the floor. Because I became someone he didn't recognize. Nobody spoke. The truth had finally entered the room, not through police, not through lawyers, through a tired man sitting beside an old desk. I asked quietly, Did you take the missing files? He looked up immediately. No. I studied his face. He appeared genuinely surprised. What files? The originals. His expression changed. The originals are gone. Linda nodded. When? We don't know. Michael stood. Who else knew? Only Robert. And you. And you? He shook his head. I didn't come here. Emily crossed her arms. How do we know? Because I only learned you were here this morning. I frowned. How? He hesitated. Rachel. The answer surprised me. Rachel. She heard you talking last night. I remembered. She had remained after Michael left. She knew about the storage unit. My stomach tightened. Where is she? He looked confused. At home. Linda suddenly spoke. Not necessarily. Everyone turned. What do you mean? She looked at Michael. Did Rachel know about the debts? Some of them. Did she know about the signatures? His silence answered. My heart sank again. More secrets, more lies, more people involved. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. A beam of sunlight entered through the open storage door. The storm was ending, but ours was only beginning. Michael looked directly at me. I'm sorry. The words sounded sincere, but they arrived too late. Robert was dead. Our family had been shattered. And somewhere, someone still possessed the original documents. I looked at my son. Did you abandon your father the night he died? The question froze the entire room. Michael became pale. Emily stared. Linda stopped breathing. My son looked away. And in that moment, before he even answered, I knew there was another secret. One even Robert had never told me. No one spoke. The question remained between us like a wound. Did you abandon your father the night he died? Michael stood beside his truck, his hands trembling. The color had disappeared from his face. Even the rainwater dripping from the roof seemed louder than his silence. Emily took a step toward him. Answer her! Michael looked at the ground. I didn't kill him. I didn't ask that. My own voice sounded strange to me. Calm. Cold. A voice I hardly recognized. I asked if you left him alone. Michael closed his eyes. For several seconds, all I heard was the distant sound of a train somewhere beyond the old railroad tracks. Finally, he spoke. We argued. Linda lowered her head. Emily sat down heavily in the chair. I felt my heart pounding inside my chest. When? The night he died. The world suddenly seemed smaller. Robert had left the house that morning smiling. He had kissed me. He had promised to return soon. And then he had met our son. I asked quietly, where? At the old diner. The one on Main Street, he nodded. Why? He called me. About the papers. Again he nodded. The storage unit felt colder. Linda spoke softly. Robert told me he planned to meet him. Michael looked surprised. He told you everything? No, Linda answered. Only what he thought might become important. I sat down slowly. My legs no longer felt steady. What happened? Michael rubbed his face. He wanted me to stop. Stop what? The loans. The paperwork. The signatures. His voice cracked. He told me he would involve the lawyer. James Whitmore, the note in Robert's phone. Talk to James if necessary. I suddenly understood. Robert had been preparing. Not because he wanted to destroy our son, because he wanted to protect me. Michael continued. He said he couldn't let me risk your future. And what did you say? He looked away. I said things I shouldn't have. Emily crossed her arms. What things? He remained silent. I whispered, Tell me. He swallowed. I told him he cared more about money than his own son. The words hit me hard, because Robert had never cared about money, not once. He cared about security, home, family, peace. I remembered all the times he fixed old furniture instead of buying new, the years he drove the same truck, the vacations we never took because he wanted savings for the children. Michael continued. He said I didn't understand responsibility. And I got angry. Linda closed her eyes. She already knew. Perhaps Robert had told her. Perhaps he had expected this moment. Michael sat down again. He told me he was going to speak to James. When? The next morning. But he died that evening. Yes. Silence. The question still remained. Did you leave him? Michael's eyes filled with tears. I did. Emily covered her mouth. I couldn't breathe. He wasn't feeling well. The room froze. What? He looked tired. How tired? He said his chest hurt. My vision blurred. My husband, my Robert, alone, in pain, and our son had left him. What did you do? I told him to see a doctor. Then he said he wanted to go home. Did you take him? No. My voice barely existed. Why? He began crying, actual tears, the tears of a frightened child. Because perhaps inside him, that frightened child still existed. He told me to leave. Did you? Yes. Why? His shoulders shook. Because I was angry. Emily stood. Oh my God. I looked at my son, not with hatred, not even with anger, with heartbreak. Because this was worse, much worse. He hadn't killed his father, but he had walked away, and Robert had died alone. Michael whispered. I called him later. When? About an hour afterward. Did he answer? No. Did you go back? He shook his head. My heart broke. Not because my son had made a mistake, because he had made the kind of mistake that never allows a second chance. Linda finally spoke. Robert called me. Michael looked up. What? He called me after you left. The room fell silent. My breathing stopped. That evening. What did he say? Linda removed her phone from her purse. I saved the voicemail. My hands trembled. Voicemail? She nodded. He sounded exhausted. Emily whispered, Can we hear it? Linda looked at me, only me, because ultimately this belonged to a wife, to the woman Robert had spent 38 years loving. I nodded. She pressed the screen, static, then Robert's voice, weak, tired, but unmistakably Robert. Linda, it's me. A long pause. If anything happens. His breathing sounded labored. He won't stop. My entire body froze. Michael lowered his head. Robert continued. Please make sure Adriana sees everything. Several seconds of silence. I think I waited too long. The message ended. No one moved. No one spoke. I had just heard my husband's final words. Not to me. Not because he didn't love me. Because he was trying to protect me, and because he no longer knew how. Tears rolled down my face. Emily cried quietly. Even Linda was wiping her eyes. Michael stared at the floor. His father had died carrying the weight of his son's mistakes, and perhaps his own. I finally spoke. Did Dad tell you he was sick? Michael looked up. No. Did he ask for help? No. Did he tell you goodbye? His voice broke. He said he loved me. Silence. What did you say? Michael began crying harder. I told him he didn't understand. I closed my eyes. Robert's last conversation with his son had ended in pain. Not because he'd stopped loving Michael, because he refused to stop protecting me. The wind outside had stopped completely. The clouds were beginning to break. Sunlight entered the storage unit. Linda looked toward the empty shelf. There is still one problem. The missing file, the originals, the evidence, the reason Robert had rented this place. Michael looked confused. What file? The originals disappeared. He frowned. We don't know. He stood immediately. I didn't take them. Emily looked skeptical. Then who? No one answered, because suddenly another possibility appeared. Rachel. She knew. She had stayed at the house. She heard our conversation. She knew about the storage unit. Michael seemed to realize the same thing. Rachel wouldn't. His voice stopped, because none of us truly knew anymore. Too many secrets. Too many lies. Too many people protecting themselves. Linda suddenly looked at her watch. Oh no. What? James? Our lawyer. She nodded. He was supposed to meet Robert the morning after he died. My heart skipped. What do you mean? He has copies. Everyone turned toward her. What copies? The evidence. The legal documents. The original statements. Hope entered the room for the first time all day. The lawyer has them. Robert delivered them 2 weeks ago. I almost collapsed from relief. Robert, always one step ahead, always preparing, even while his heart was failing, even while his family was breaking apart. Michael looked at me. Mom. I turned toward him. His eyes were full of regret. I never wanted this. I believed him. And somehow that made it worse, because evil would have been easier. Instead, I saw something much more tragic. A son who had become desperate, a father who had become afraid, and a family standing in the ruins left behind. I looked toward the open door. The storm had passed, but tomorrow we would meet James Whitmore. And for the first time, the truth would no longer belong to Robert. It would belong to all of us. The drive back to town felt longer than usual. No one spoke. Emily drove. Linda sat in the front seat. Michael followed us in his truck several car lengths behind. I sat alone in the back, staring through the window as fields and old barns passed by. The storm had disappeared. Blue sky had begun pushing through the clouds, but inside me the storm remained. I had learned that my son had forged my signature. I had learned that my husband had spent months protecting me. And I had learned that Robert's final argument with Michael had ended only hours before his death. At 70 years old, I suddenly felt as though my entire marriage and family had become a puzzle. The only person who knew where all the pieces belonged was buried in a cemetery. Linda finally spoke. James opens his office at 9. Emily glanced at the dashboard clock. It was only 8:15. Should we call him? Linda shook her head. No. Robert specifically asked him not to discuss anything over the phone. I looked out the window. Always another secret, always another precaution. Robert had been preparing for something, perhaps for months, perhaps longer. As we entered town, I noticed people beginning their normal lives. The bakery opened. Children waited for school buses. Cars stopped at traffic lights. The world continued. Mine had stopped 4 days earlier. James Whitmore's office occupied the second floor of a brick building near the courthouse. Robert had trusted him for years. He had written our wills, handled our insurance paperwork, prepared retirement documents. He attended our anniversary party. He had been a friend. When we parked outside the building, Michael remained beside his truck. He didn't approach us. He looked exhausted, older. For the first time, he resembled his father. Emily looked at me. Do you want him to come? I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted distance. Before I could decide, Linda spoke. Robert wanted him present. I looked at her. He told you that? She nodded. He said the truth had to belong to everyone. The words sounded exactly like Robert. Even in conflict, he had wanted his family together. We entered the office at 9 sharp. James Whitmore stood behind his desk. He was 73 years old, thin, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. The moment he saw me, his expression changed. Adriana. He walked around the desk and hugged me. I'm sorry. I began crying again. Too many tears, too many days, too much grief. He looked at Michael, at Emily, at Linda, and finally, he sighed. So Robert was right. The room became silent. What do you mean? I asked. James removed his glasses. He said if all of you arrived together, it meant he had run out of time. My heart tightened. He knew. He suspected. Michael sat down. What exactly did Dad tell you? James opened a locked drawer. Inside rested a thick manila envelope. Robert's handwriting appeared across the front. For James only, if necessary. I suddenly realized that my husband had left pieces of himself everywhere. With Linda, with James, inside the storage unit, inside the phone. Everywhere except with me, and somehow that hurt. James looked at me. Robert loved you very much. The words nearly broke me. I know. He thought he was protecting you. I know. He nodded slowly. Then he opened the envelope. Inside were documents, bank records, letters, legal statements, and one smaller envelope. My name, Adriana. My breathing stopped. James handed it to me. He said you should read this first. My hands trembled. The room disappeared. Only Robert remained. His handwriting, his name, his final words. I opened the letter. My dearest Adriana, if you are reading this, then I failed to tell you the truth myself. For that, I am sorry. I wanted to protect your peace, but perhaps I protected it for too long. Michael is not a bad man. He is a frightened man. Fear makes people do terrible things. Please remember that. I discovered the forged documents 7 months ago. I confronted him. He promised to stop. He promised to fix everything. I wanted to believe our son. Perhaps because I remember the little boy he once was. But I also knew I had to protect you. Our home belongs to you. Our savings belong to you. Your future belongs to you. No one should ever take that from you. Please forgive me for the secrets. Everything I did because I love you. And if Michael still has time to become the man he once was, I pray that you help him find his way back. I have loved you every day for 38 years. Robert, I could no longer see the page. My tears blurred the ink. Emily cried openly. Even James looked away. Michael sat completely still. His father had forgiven him, even before he asked. James finally spoke. There is more. He removed several legal documents. The signatures were examined. I looked up. Examined by a specialist. He handed me a report. The conclusion appeared clearly. Forgery confirmed. My heart sank. The evidence was undeniable. James looked toward Michael. Your father did not file charges. Michael whispered, Why? Because he believed you would come back to your senses. Silence. James continued. He prepared legal protections. What kind? Emily asked. The house cannot be transferred. The accounts cannot be accessed. Everything requires Adriana's approval. I suddenly realized something. Robert had succeeded, despite everything. He had protected me, even after death. Michael finally spoke. Am I going to jail? No one answered immediately, because that question belonged to me. Only me. James looked at me. The decision is yours. The room became silent. I looked at my son, the same boy who once held my hand crossing the street, the same boy Robert taught to ride a bicycle, the same boy who had forged my signature, who had lied, who had abandoned his father during their final argument, but also the same frightened man Robert had already forgiven. I asked quietly, "Did you love your father?" Michael began crying. "More than anyone." "Then why didn't you stop?" "I thought I could fix it." "You couldn't." "I know." He looked broken, perhaps for the first time in years. James handed me another document. "What is this?" "Robert's final instructions." I opened it. Only one sentence appeared. "Do not let money bury our family with me." I closed my eyes. That was Robert. Even now, even after death, still trying to save all of us. Outside the office window, church bells began ringing. The same bells I had heard at our wedding. The same bells that would ring at noon every Sunday. I looked at Michael. He could not even lift his head. And suddenly I realized the choice before me was not legal. It was personal. My husband had trusted me with the future of our family, and now I had to decide whether our son's mistakes would become the end of our story, or the beginning of something neither Robert nor I had expected. Nobody left James Whitmore's office for several minutes. The room had become very quiet. Robert's letter still rested in my lap. His words echoed inside my mind. "Do not let money bury our family with me." I looked at Michael. My son sat near the window with his head lowered. He had cried more during the past 2 hours than I had seen him cry in the previous 20 years. Part of me wanted to walk over and hold him. Another part still saw my forged signature, still saw the papers, still heard Robert's tired voice saying, "He won't stop." James finally cleared his throat. "There is one matter we still need to discuss." Everyone looked up. "What matter?" Emily asked. James opened another folder. Unlike the others, this one carried several official documents. "The legal consequences." Michael's shoulders tightened. Rachel suddenly appeared in the doorway. Every person in the room turned. She looked pale, exhausted, as though she had not slept. "I hope I'm not too late." Michael stood immediately. "Rachel." She didn't look at him. Instead, she walked toward me. "I'm sorry, Adriana." I nodded quietly. "Please sit down." She took the empty chair beside Emily. James adjusted his glasses. "Rachel, there are some things you should hear." She looked at Michael. "I already know some of them." My son lowered his eyes. For the first time, I realized Rachel had been carrying her own burden. She had lived beside Michael's secrets. She had watched the debt grow. She had watched his lies, and perhaps she had been just as powerless as Robert. James removed several papers. "The forged signatures constitute fraud." The word landed heavily. Fraud. Not a mistake. Not poor judgment. Fraud. Michael whispered, "I know." The attempted transfers could have resulted in criminal charges. Rachel closed her eyes. Emily sat perfectly still. I could barely breathe. James continued. However, Robert chose not to pursue legal action. He looked directly at me. Now the decision belongs to you, Adriana. The room became silent again. I hated that silence. It felt too much like a courtroom, too much like punishment. Robert had always hated punishment. He believed people should face consequences, but he also believed in second chances. Michael finally spoke. If you want to press charges, I won't fight you. I looked at him. For the first time since Robert died, he seemed completely honest. No excuses, no explanations, only exhaustion. Rachel suddenly began crying. I didn't know about the signatures. Nobody spoke. She wiped her eyes. I knew we had debt. How much? Emily asked. Rachel looked down. I thought it was about 80,000. Michael closed his eyes. It was over 400. Rachel looked toward him. You lied to me too. His voice cracked. I know. She shook her head. I sold jewelry. I emptied my savings. I took extra shifts. And you still lied. Tears ran down her face. I suddenly understood something. Michael hadn't only hurt his parents. He had destroyed his own marriage. James carefully removed another envelope. Robert left this for Michael. My son looked surprised. For me. James nodded. He told me to give it to you only if you agreed to hear the truth. Michael slowly took the envelope. His hands trembled. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Robert's handwriting. The room became silent. Michael began reading. After only a few lines, he started crying. Actual sobs, the kind that come from years of guilt. Emily quietly asked, What did Dad say? Michael wiped his eyes. He said he still believes I'm a good man. My own tears returned. Even now, even after everything, Robert still believed in his son. Michael continued reading. He says failure doesn't make me worthless. He says fear made me forget who I was. Rachel covered her face. James looked toward the window. No one wanted to interrupt. Finally, Michael reached the final paragraph. He stopped. His breathing changed. I asked softly, What is it? He looked at me. Dad says he already forgave me. The room became completely still. Robert had forgiven him. Before he died, before the funeral, before the arguments, before we even discovered the truth. I suddenly realized something. Robert wasn't protecting money. He was protecting people. Me, Michael, even Rachel, perhaps himself. Emily finally asked the question nobody wanted. What about the missing file? James frowned. What missing file? Linda explained about the empty shelf in the storage unit, the original documents, the missing evidence, the muddy footprints. James became serious. Those files are important. Do you have copies? I asked. Some. But not everything. Michael looked confused. Who would take them? Nobody answered. Then Rachel spoke, very quietly. There may be someone else. We all turned toward her. What do you mean? She hesitated. There was a man. Michael immediately looked up. Rachel! She ignored them. He loaned Michael money. My stomach tightened. What man? A private lender. James frowned. Name? Rachel looked uncomfortable. Victor Reynolds. Michael stood abruptly. Stop. Rachel looked at him. No. He shook his head. He isn't involved. Rachel's voice rose. He threatened us. The room froze. I stared at my son. What? Michael sat down again. He loaned me money. How much? 100,000. Emily gasped. James removed his glasses. Was it legal? Michael didn't answer. That answer was enough. Rachel continued. He came to our house twice. He wanted repayment. He knew about your parents. I suddenly remembered the muddy footprints, the missing files, the empty shelf. Could someone else have entered the storage unit? Could someone have been searching for those documents? James spoke carefully. Did Robert know about this lender? Michael nodded. He found out. And he told me to go to the police. Did you? No? Why? Michael laughed bitterly. Because I thought I could fix everything. The same answer. Always the same answer. But life doesn't always allow people enough time to fix things. Robert certainly hadn't been given enough time. I looked toward the window. The afternoon sun had begun falling across the courthouse lawn. Only 4 days had passed since my husband's death. Yet it felt like months. Years. Entire lifetimes. James finally spoke. My recommendation is simple. Everyone looked at him. Do not make any decisions today. He looked at me. Not legal decisions. Not family decisions. Not emotional decisions. I nodded, because he was right. Grief already changes the mind. Truth changes it even more. I stood slowly. Everyone watched me. I walked toward Michael. He couldn't even look at me. I placed Robert's letter in his hands. Your father believed in you. His shoulders shook. I don't deserve it. No. He looked up. I continued. But he gave it to you anyway. Tears ran down his face. The office remained silent. And for the first time since Robert died, I realized something. The greatest inheritance my husband left behind was not money, not our home, not the savings. It was forgiveness. The question now was whether any of us were strong enough to accept it. The sun was beginning to set when we finally left James Whitmore's office. No one said much. The day had taken everything from us. Secrets, letters, confessions, forgiveness. And yet somehow, it felt as though the most difficult part still lay ahead. Michael drove Rachel home. Emily offered to stay with me. Linda returned to her apartment across town. James remained in his office surrounded by files that had become part of my family's tragedy. And I returned to my house. My home. The house Robert had spent months protecting. The house my son had almost lost. The house that suddenly felt far too quiet. As I unlocked the front door, the familiar smell of coffee and old wood greeted me. Robert's coat still hung beside the entrance. His gardening boots remained near the closet. Nothing inside had changed, only the people. Emily set her purse down. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten all day. Neither had she. But grief and exhaustion often replace hunger. She made soup while I walked slowly through the house. Robert's chair, his books, his glasses, his reading lamp. I touched the back of the recliner. For the first time since the funeral, I became angry. Not at Michael, not even at myself, at Robert. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. The empty room gave no answer. Perhaps he thought silence was protection. Perhaps he believed love meant carrying burdens alone, but marriage was supposed to share burdens. For 38 years we had shared everything, or so I believed. The telephone rang. I almost ignored it, but Emily answered. Mom! I looked up. It's Michael. I hesitated. Then I took the phone. Hello? His voice sounded tired. Can I come over? I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to say no. Another part remembered Robert's letter. Fear makes people do terrible things. Finally, I answered. Come. An hour later, Michael arrived alone. Rachel had gone to stay with her sister. He entered quietly, without his expensive jacket, without his confidence, without the image he had spent years building. He simply looked like my son. Emily remained in the kitchen. I sat across from him. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, I sold Dad's watch. I looked up. What? The gold one Grandpa gave him. My heart sank. Why? I needed money. When? Last spring. I remembered searching for that watch. Robert had told me he misplaced it. He had lied to protect his son. Again. Did Dad know? Michael nodded. He bought it back. Tears filled my eyes. Of course he did. Robert never stopped being a father, no matter how disappointed he felt, no matter how afraid. Michael continued. He paid debts. He covered loans. He gave me money. Over and over. His voice broke, and I kept asking. I sat quietly, because what could I say? Parents spend their lives helping their children. Sometimes they help too much. Sometimes love becomes protection. Sometimes protection becomes silence, and silence becomes danger. Michael looked at me. I hated him for saying no. I thought of Robert, his gentle voice, his patience, his refusal to give up. He wasn't saying no to you. I know. He was saying yes to me. Michael began crying again. Dad told me that. When the night he died, the room became still. He said Mom deserves peace. I looked toward Robert's empty chair. Yes, that sounded exactly like him, Michael continued. He said if I loved you, I had to stop. And you didn't. No. Why? He wiped his eyes. Because I was ashamed. The answer surprised me. Not greed, not hatred, shame. I thought if people knew I failed, they would leave me. I thought about Rachel, about Emily, about Robert, about myself. We had all loved him, even while he was lying, even while he was failing. He had simply been too frightened to believe it. A knock suddenly interrupted us. Emily looked through the window. Mom? I stood. Outside stood Rachel. She looked pale, terrified. I opened the door. What happened? She stepped inside. I think someone followed me. The room froze. Michael stood immediately. What? She looked at him. The man. Victor. My stomach tightened. What happened? He came to the house. Michael became pale. After I left. What did he want? Rachel's voice trembled. He asked about Robert. Every person in the room became silent. She continued. He asked whether your father kept documents. Michael looked horrified. Oh, God. Emily stepped forward. The storage unit. Rachel nodded. He knew about it. I suddenly understood. The missing file, the muddy footprints, the empty shelf. Perhaps Michael had not taken the originals. Perhaps someone else had. Michael sat down. He threatened me months ago. What did he say? I asked. He said if I couldn't pay, he'd find another way. Rachel wiped her eyes. He knew about the house? I felt cold. All those months, Robert had not only been protecting me from financial ruin, he had been protecting us from someone outside the family. Emily spoke quietly. We should call James. Michael nodded. And the police. The word police hung in the room. Strange, frightening, necessary. I looked toward Robert's photograph on the shelf. Suddenly, I understood why he had been afraid. Not only for me, for everyone. Rachel sat beside me. I'm sorry. I touched her hand. For the first time, I realized she was also a victim. She had lived beside fear, beside debt, beside lies, and still she remained. Perhaps that was love. Perhaps it was hope. The house became quiet again. Outside, darkness had settled. The grandfather clock struck 8. Michael finally looked at me. I'll do whatever it takes. I studied him. The arrogance was gone. The excuses were gone. Only regret remained. I remembered Robert's letter. If Michael still has time to become the man he once was, I pray that you help him find his way back. Perhaps this was the beginning. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But responsibility. Truth. Consequences. The things Robert had tried to teach him his entire life. I stood and walked toward Robert's chair. His sweater still hung over the armrest. I picked it up. His scent remained. And for the first time since his death, I felt him beside me. Not through secrets, not through letters, but through his final wish. Do not let money bury our family with me. I turned toward my children, toward Rachel, toward the broken pieces of my family. And I realized that Robert had left me one final responsibility. He had protected us for 38 years. Now it was my turn. I barely slept that night. The house felt different, not because Robert was gone. I had already begun learning how to live with that pain. The difference was something else. For the first time in months, perhaps years, the secrets were finally coming into the light. And yet one shadow still remained. Victor Reynolds, the man Rachel feared, the man who knew about the house, the man who apparently knew about Robert. At nearly midnight, Michael left to take Rachel to her sister's home. Emily stayed with me. Neither of us wanted to be alone. Before going to bed, I walked through the house. I turned off the kitchen lights, straightened the cushions, folded Robert's sweater. Small habits. The habits of a wife. When I reached our bedroom, I stopped beside his side of the bed. His watch sat on the nightstand. The watch Michael had sold. The watch Robert secretly bought back. I picked it up. The hands still moved. Tick, tick, tick. Robert had repaired this watch 3 times over the years because he hated replacing things. Everything deserves another chance, he often said. At the time, he was talking about watches. Perhaps he had always been talking about people. The following morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. For the first time since the funeral, I made breakfast. Emily smiled. That smells good. I was tired of grief food. She laughed softly. The sound surprised both of us. We had forgotten laughter existed. At 9 o'clock, James called. Adriana? His voice sounded serious. What happened? I spoke with the police. My stomach tightened. And they know Victor Reynolds. Emily looked up immediately. Who is he? James hesitated. He has several complaints against him. For what? Private lending? Intimidation? Collection practices? I sat down. Is he dangerous? He can be. Emily crossed her arms. Wonderful, James continued. He may have entered the storage unit. Can they prove it? Not yet. But they want statements. The idea of police interviews exhausted me. 5 days earlier, my biggest concern had been funeral flowers. Now, strangers wanted statements about fraud debt and missing documents. Life changes quietly. Then suddenly, all at once, around noon, Michael arrived. This time, Rachel came with him. Neither looked as though they had slept. Michael carried a small cardboard box. What is that? I asked. He set it on the kitchen table. My office files. Emily frowned. Why? Because I'm done hiding. He opened the box. Inside lay bank statements, bills, loan agreements, letters, everything. I looked at him. What are you doing? Telling the truth. For several hours we sat around the kitchen table, the same table where we celebrated birthdays, where Robert read newspapers, where the children once colored pictures. Now it had become a place of honesty. Michael explained everything: the failed investments, the business partner who disappeared, the growing debt, Victor's loans, the threats, the panic, the forged signatures, and finally the worst part, his shame. I couldn't tell, Dad. I looked at him. But you did. Only after he discovered it. Why not me? He began crying. Because you believed I was successful. I understood then. Many people fear losing money. Michael feared losing love. He thought failure would make us stop loving him. Robert understood that. Perhaps because fathers understand sons in ways mothers sometimes cannot. Rachel finally spoke. I wanted to leave. Michael looked down. I know. I packed twice. He nodded. But I stayed. Why? Emily asked. Rachel wiped her eyes. Because I remembered who he used to be. The room became quiet. Who he used to be. Robert had written the same thing. If Michael still has time to become the man he once was, perhaps they had both seen something that Michael himself could no longer see. That afternoon, we drove together to the cemetery. It was Michael's idea. No one objected. The sky was clear. Autumn leaves covered the ground. Robert's grave still looked new. The flowers from the funeral had begun fading. Michael stood quietly. For several minutes nobody spoke. Then he knelt. I had never seen my son kneel. Not in church, not at weddings, not even at his father's funeral. But there beside the fresh earth, he finally broke. I'm sorry, Dad. His voice cracked. Emily cried. Rachel held his shoulder. I stood beside the man I had raised, and for the first time since Robert died, I saw not the man who forged signatures, not the man who lied, not the man drowning in debt. I saw the little boy who once waited by the front window every evening for his father to come home from work. Michael continued. I thought money would fix everything. The wind moved through the trees. I thought success mattered. Tears rolled down his face. I forgot what you taught me. No one interrupted, because some conversations belong only to the living and the dead. After several minutes, he stood. His eyes were red. But something had changed. Not magically, not completely, but enough. As we prepared to leave, I noticed something beneath the flowers. A small envelope. My name, Adriana. My hands trembled. Who left this? Emily looked confused. Rachel shook her head. Michael stared. The cemetery groundskeeper approached us. A gentleman dropped it off this morning. What gentleman? He didn't give his name. My heart began racing. I opened the envelope. Inside rested only one sheet of paper. 3 words. Check the bench. Everyone looked around. The old wooden bench near the oak tree stood 50 feet away. The bench where Robert and I had once sat after visiting his parents' graves. Slowly, we walked toward it. Underneath the bench, taped carefully beneath the wooden seat, was a sealed package. James Whitmore's name appeared on the front. Michael looked at me. What is this? I carefully opened it. Inside lay copies, original documents, bank records, the missing signatures, everything. Linda had been wrong. The files had not been stolen. Robert had moved them. One final precaution, one final layer of protection. At the bottom sat a note. In Robert's handwriting, trust takes time to rebuild, but love is worth the wait. I could no longer hold back my tears, even after death, even after all the pain. Robert was still guiding us, still protecting us, still teaching us, and standing beside his grave, holding his final message, I realized something. My husband had not left us a mystery. He had left us a path home. 3 weeks passed after we found the documents beneath the cemetery bench. Autumn slowly settled over our town. The leaves turned gold. The mornings became colder. And little by little, life began moving again. Not returning, never returning. Because after losing someone you love, life does not go backward. It only moves forward, carrying both the pain and the memory. The police eventually interviewed Michael. James handled the legal paperwork. The documents Robert had hidden beneath the bench proved everything. The forged signatures, the attempted transfers, the financial records, the debt, and Victor Reynolds. Several other complaints had already been filed against him. The authorities began investigating his lending practices. The missing files from the storage unit no longer mattered. Robert had once again protected us, even after death. Michael accepted responsibility. That surprised everyone, perhaps even himself. He met with the bank, sold his office furniture, closed the business, sold the truck he had once been so proud of. He began working for a local construction company. The pay was modest. The hours were long. But every Friday he visited me. Sometimes we spoke. Sometimes we sat quietly. Healing does not always arrive through words. Rachel returned home. Not immediately, not easily. She and Michael attended counseling. Some days they argued, some days they cried. Some days they simply sat together. But for the first time in years, there were no lies between them. Emily continued visiting every week. Daniel repaired several things around the house Robert had never finished. The broken gate, the porch railing, the old kitchen cabinet, small repairs, small acts of love. One afternoon, nearly a month after the funeral, Linda came to visit. She carried a box. "What is this?" I asked. She smiled. "Robert wanted you to have it." Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures from company picnics, retirement dinners, bank events. There was Robert, younger, smiling, and there was Linda, never standing too close, never looking like a secret lover, only a friend, a loyal friend, a woman my husband trusted. I looked at her. You loved him. She smiled sadly. As a friend. I nodded, because now I understood. Not every secret woman is a betrayal. Sometimes she is simply the person helping your husband carry a burden he doesn't know how to share. Linda looked around the living room. You know he talked about you constantly. I laughed softly. Really? He was completely in love with you. The tears still came, even after weeks. Perhaps they always would. She reached into her purse. There is one more thing. She handed me an envelope, Robert's handwriting. Again. I smiled through tears. How many letters did this man write? Linda laughed. Apparently dozens. I opened it carefully. My dearest Adriana, if Linda gives you this, then enough time has passed. I hope you are smiling again. I hope Emily is still worrying too much. I hope Michael is trying, and I hope you finally understand something I was too stubborn to say. You saved my life long before I ever saved yours. You gave me a family. You gave me a home. You gave me 38 years that I would gladly live all over again. Please do not spend the years you have left grieving the years we already had. Live, laugh, bake your bread, plant your flowers, and if our son finds his way home, welcome him. Because people sometimes lose themselves, but love helps them return. I will always love you. Robert. I read the letter 3 times, then I folded it carefully. For the first time since his death, I smiled, not because the pain had disappeared, but because I finally understood him. Several months later, I made a decision. I sold the large house, the house Robert and I had shared for decades. Not because I wanted to leave him, because I wanted to carry him forward. Emily helped me find a small cottage near her neighborhood. It had a tiny garden, a bright kitchen, and enough space for one woman beginning again. Robert's retirement savings remained protected. James helped organize everything. For the first time in my life, I understood our finances completely. Robert would have liked that. On Saturdays, I began teaching baking classes at the community center. Mostly women my age attended. Widows, grandmothers, women beginning again. Sometimes we made bread, sometimes pies, sometimes we simply talked. One afternoon, one of the women asked me, "How did you survive losing your husband?" I thought about the funeral, the phone, Linda, the secrets, the lies, the forgiveness. And finally, I answered, I learned that love can survive the truth. Because it had. Michael slowly rebuilt his life. He never became wealthy. He never returned to expensive cars or business investments. Instead, he became something Robert would have recognized. Honest. Rachel remained beside him. Emily remained beside me, and every Sunday we ate dinner together. The first few dinners were awkward, then easier, then normal. 1 year after Robert's death, I returned to the cemetery alone. The autumn leaves had returned. The same oak tree stood nearby. The same bench. I carried the black phone, Robert's secret phone, the phone that rang during his funeral, the phone that shattered my world. I sat beside his grave. For several minutes, I said nothing. Then I placed the phone beside his headstone. I understand now. The wind moved gently through the trees. I was angry. I was hurt, but I understand. I touched the stone. You never stopped loving us. Tears rolled down my face, But they were different tears, not tears of loss, tears of gratitude. Because the truth Robert left behind had not destroyed our family. It had saved it. As I stood to leave, sunlight passed through the trees. And suddenly I remembered the exact moment the phone rang inside the church, the moment my world ended, and the moment it began again. Because sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the day that finally reveals the truth. And sometimes love speaks one last time. Not through words, not through letters, but through a ringing phone that refuses to stay silent. I walked toward my car, the cemetery behind me, the future ahead of me. And for the first time in many years, I was no longer simply Robert Murray's wife. I was Adriana Murray, and I still had a life to live.